So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, and their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Brendan Fatchett, who's founder and CEO at Bidding Limited. So, firstly, Brendan, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, your business, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here first and foremost. My company is a company called Bidding Limited. We're based in Wakefield and Leeds, and we have a small satellite office in Edinburgh. Traditionally, we started out as a consultancy business supporting businesses of all sizes, but predominantly SMEs who
Yep,
were struggling with public sector facing tenders. And often that's
yep,
a nightmare moment for you when a piece of work comes up that you think you can win and you get the documents from the public sector, whether that be local councils, the NHS, and all kinds of other public sector bodies, and you look at the questions and you think, actually, there's some of these I can answer brilliantly. The ones we tend to find people can answer brilliantly, the ones that say, tell me about your business. People are really good at that one. That often isn't the winning where you get winning from. And when you're competing against bigger businesses, they'll
yep,
be really good at the difficult questions. So we often get people coming to us to talk about questions around information governance. Not a sexy topic, a difficult one for SMEs to understand. And our job really is to help people on that journey. So we like to say to ourselves that when we get a client, we can help them quickly transform from 5 out of 5, yes, of course, in their own area because they want to be great at
yes,
whatever the offer is. But often they get 2 out of 5 when it comes to those complex public sector focused type questions
yes,
that come up in every single bid.
yeah,
Pride ourselves on getting you onto those 4s and 5s in those areas as well, and letting them explain the journey. There's a couple of things we do, Chris. So we started out, my background is in digital entrepreneurship. So I've had invested in and grown a number of digital companies that have exited. So I've got a really strong background in that. And when I got into this business properly about 2.5 years ago, we just felt there was a digital route here, both in terms of
yep,
providing SMEs access to really great, well-written content to support their bids themselves when they're writing them themselves. But
yep,
also we felt that was going to be a new world, and that new world is AI.
yes.
So we've been through everything, Chris. We've tried every possible permutation. And we became, and I think we're going to see a bit more of this. I think there was a real overwhelming sense of excitement when we first saw ChatGPT and all of the other generative AI solutions. And people thought, great, this is going to suddenly solve all of our problems. But as we've got to learn and get used to using ChatGPT and others, and all the enterprise products around that, we do see that the language used is peculiar. We do see that
Yep.
errors creep into the work. And actually, we talked to lots of clients who say we rushed into it and then found ourselves in a situation where we we're spending more time unpicking the generative
Yep.
element of the bid that we were writing
Yep.
than we did just writing it ourselves.
Yep.
So over the last 18 months, we've invested a lot of time looking at AI is a big spectrum. So there's a massive amount of PR and noise around generative AI. Generative AI. That's something that people I think understand because they
Yes.
can literally go on and try. Google does a great job of it now.
Yep.
ChatGPT, you see it everywhere. But actually, that's the tip of the iceberg. There are many other areas where AI is really starting to make a big difference and shifting the way that people work. So we've
Yep.
really doubled down on focusing on supporting companies to write bids effectively quicker using their own voice and their own content. So we do two things now. We have a product called Virtual Bid Team, which supports our customers in a number of ways. We give them quick access to the market so they can see what bids are currently live and also have a look backwards to see what bids have been out in their space so they know what's coming. We did a piece
Yes.
of work yesterday for a company in the digital marketing space, and we're able to show them they've always been skeptical about public sector bidding, and we're able to find them over 40 million pounds worth of opportunities. So
Oh,
they're out there, people don't know they're there. So we've done that piece of work. We also provide them now with a content library, which we call Bid Vault, which is something that we've created internally, which is around taking those really hard to answer questions that SMEs don't have a background in and giving them a framework to work from.
brilliant.
So we're not writing the questions, Chris. We're not writing your answers for you. What we're doing is we're writing maybe it's a 500 or 1,000 word answer with prompts in it to allow you to understand what the
Well,
commissioner is likely to be looking for, i.e., what is the right answer? Bidding is inherently a bit like taking your old GCSEs and your A levels, Chris, because I'm that age. Um, I know my kids have just been through it as well, and it's the same thing here. You really want to be as prepared as possible, and you can go to those books when you're doing A levels and GCSE, and they'll tell you what markers are looking for to get the higher grades, and it's the
yeah,
same. We're effectively telling you from multiple markets what markers are looking for currently to get you
brilliant.
the highest possible marks. So you've got that solution. It's all integrated on a digital platform in the cloud. And then the final piece, which is the piece that we're most excited about, is that we can take your content, if I can say the word, and we can index it and we can search it for you in an instant. So in the old days, if you wanted to order your bid work, and you've got a bid team of one or two and you're producing 15, 20 bids a year, that is days and days and days and days of indexing work for a human. We can do that work for you in under an hour. In
Wow.
under an hour. It's amazing. When you see it, one of the things we've had to do in our demos is effectively slow the indexing in the demo because it's so fast. Because it's so fast. And then on top of that, we've really moved into search. So we always felt, and we talked to all of our bid people and people that we've worked with, both as worked for us as a team or worked externally in other organizations, and just going all the way back in time, we've worked with bid teams and I've had big at scale bid teams. Finding the right things at the right time quickly has always been a problem. So
Yep.
you may have written a bid 12 months ago, Chris, and that bid was fantastic. And you remember, there's an amazing answer in that one. The commissioner loved it. I got 5 out of 5. You've got a SharePoint repository and there's hundreds and hundreds of documents. I can't remember which bit it was in. I don't remember what the date was. This is solving that. But while solving that, it's also remembering that and building up a more sophisticated learning search pattern for you, which then is shared across teams. So, you might have 5 or 6 people who are involved in producing a bid. They can all quickly access those documents as well. So we started there, and that's going really well. We've got amazing reception, people signing up every week now to the product, and they're really appreciating. It's a really good, effective cost saving as well for you, because my background was traditionally in enterprise technology, which is a really different type of thing. But this is
Yeah.
very much standard SaaS. The prices are designed to be attractive. The prices are designed to deliver for you a real immediate saving in terms of time and effort and energy. So we're making that transformation happen in real time. But now we're also getting customers coming back to us and saying, actually, I've got this big repository of data and written work that we do in something else. So business case building is a good example. Running boards, Chris, is a really good example. So where people have got a board and they're running multiple papers into those boards and they've got a
Yes.
really large repository of information that's collected over a period of time, often it's very hard. People start to write those board papers again from scratch every month or every quarter, depending on the frequency.
Yep.
It stops all of that. And for the price that we're charging, it's a no-brainer. So it's one of those journeys that we go on where I
Amazing.
love it when something unexpected happens. And we're having almost regular conversations now as we talk to clients about the bidding option, that they can see immediate other ways of using the tools. And so we
Yep.
just actually literally last week introduced our new product, which is called Virtual Doc Team, which is really that thing to help other kind of user cases where so much time is lost to finding,
Oh yeah.
working out what's in the document to allow you to build the next document.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm absolutely convinced, by the way, Chris, that it would be a revelation for the public sector. Having worked in the public sector for, I don't know, best part of 15, 20 years, nothing was ever where you wanted it. You could never find the information you needed, and you spent so much time
Oh
uh,
yeah.
in documents. I was talking to a head of procurement in the NHS just before Christmas, and he was explaining how much time he takes every month to produce his reports because he can't easily access the data he needs to build them. So we're in this great space, transformational,
Brilliant.
exciting. We're right at the cutting edge. It's where I like to be, Chris.
Love it. I absolutely love it. It's I was just thinking back. My first business, we operated in the power industry, just just after and through the period of privatization. But all the procurement was basically public sector procurement process. So having to write in those old days almost everything from scratch, and I'm shuddering right now and starting to sweat. I think about how many hours and hours I must have spent. And
I, I, I don't want to age you, Chris, but I'm old enough to remember where you have to used to post your bids.
oh man, oh
Commission. I
yeah,
mean, I say that to people now and they think that can't be true.
oh
Like,
no, yeah.
you had to finish like 5 days in advance of the deadline so you could prepare the documents in multiple, get them. I can remember saying, what do you call those people on the riders on the bikes to make sure we got in time.
I did a run to it was the Atomic Energy Authority in what Risley, and I had to jump in the car and get there before 12 o'clock because the courier hadn't turned up.
Yeah,
They
it is easier now, I have to say, but much of the problems that you faced 20 years ago are still problems
Yeah,
today.
I can sort of see it. I mean, we were a software company as well, so we started to have a library of stuff, which I guess is you said the indexing stuff.
Yes, that's it, exactly.
Didn't use automation, but we created something that allowed us to do it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it was a ball ache for want of a better word. It just all of that. So just imagine having all that really supported is wonderful. So
Yes.
you touched a little bit on your background, Brenda, but if maybe take a little bit back, how your background, how you got into business, and why this particular one. You've touched a little bit. We're really fascinated
Yeah,
to.
it's a bit of a winding journey, Chris, if I'm honest with you.
It
Business
always
was
is, Brendan. That's all good.
business was never my first priority.
Okay.
Sport was my first priority,
Big
and
sporting
I
member
went
out
as I
there.
came out of university. I always dreamt of being a sports broadcaster. That was my
Oh, brilliant.
passion at that time. And I worked for both the ITV and the BBC for about 9 years broadcasting. So I got to really scratch that itch, I guess, if you like. So I worked all over the country, covered all kinds of football teams. I did full match commentaries, hundreds of them actually.
Amazing.
And that was amazing. And sort of really at that age, when you're in your 20s, you've got no responsibilities, you've got no kids, you're not married. It was just great. The sort of last full season I did doing that, which was way back in 2001, I guess. I
Right.
was probably watching 80 football games during a year or more, possibly, and I loved it. And I'd travel anywhere and go anywhere. I was actually going through some old stuff that I'm tidying through, and I'm finding all of these press pass tickets I've got, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to Swansea on a Wednesday night away from home to watch Swansea versus Plymouth to do it for BBC local radio, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not going to do that now, that's for sure. So very much an age thing, very much something that I had a really burning passion for, and so when I did it, but there's a limit to as a career in that you sort of I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't doing enough. It wasn't satisfying me enough. So,
Yes.
inevitably, I suppose you come to a bit of a junction in life. And as we're in the north, I'll be honest, I love living in the north. I'm a northern person, and this is where I wanted to be. And much of the sort of promotions and doing bigger and better things involved moving to London, and that wasn't for me. I didn't want to do that. I
Yeah.
have nothing against London in particular, but I was brought up here. I love it. I don't necessarily want to live anywhere else. So it was there's a combination of things going on in the background. So yeah, oddly from there, I took a sort of a weird turn into the NHS. So what happened was I ended up in Leeds running a radio station, which was related to uh, sort of betting and stuff, and it was fine. And it ended up being Sky Bet. So the actual the kernel of that ended up being bought up by new 8 different iterations. But I was running a radio station for them, bizarrely on long wave, which seems like a weird thing to say because nobody will probably know if they're under the age of 40 what long wave is. But anyway, there used to be a music station called Atlantic 252, and we took it over and it became Team Talk 252, and we were based in the centre of Leeds. And we had a bundle of fun. It was just an amazing sort of 10 to 12 months. I was running the day-to-day operations at the station, and then we just ran out of money. Literally ran out of money. I'm a bit more streetwise now, Chris. I might have seen it coming, but 20, 28 when you're having a ball, and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you're just enjoying yourself with a great group of people.
No,
No real sort of business acumen to talk about. I was a broadcaster by training, so why would I? And it just went pop overnight. So I had a period of time, reflection. What did I want to do? All of the opportunities that came to me were in London for broadcasting. I just about, well, no, yeah, I just got married, and my wife just moved up from London. So it did feel like a bit of a, well, it'd been a bit weird if I'd said to her, right, I know you've literally just closed shop, moved up to Wakefield as is, and now we're going to do that all again, but backwards to where you were, where you just left. So didn't feel like much of an option for me, and so I ended up taking a job in the NHS really because my wife was working in the NHS, and she said, "Oh, there's this job working for one of the trusts in Leeds, doing their communications," and it sort of felt like a fit. I don't know why, really. Now I look
Yeah.
back and think, well, it wasn't really that close a fit. But anyway, I sort of, I mean, it's an interesting piece. I always talk about this to people and I say the shock, having worked in fast-moving private sector organization, everything was about
Yeah.
efficiency, being quick, not messing about. And in that first handful of months I was in the NHS, Chris, I have this very vivid memory of being in a meeting very early on, maybe the first couple of weeks, and the agenda was enormous. It went on for days, and I was like, well, that's fine. I assume I just come in, do my bit, and leave. Right? Why would I sit through
Yeah.
all of this stuff that is not really relevant to me? Lots of which was clinically focused, that really wasn't, yeah, was never of particular interest to me in the context of doing the day-to-day job. So that's what I did. I turned up with my stuff. I was ready, prepared, did my bit, closed my book, and this is how we would have worked in the private sector. Stood up and left the meeting, and there was like gasps of horror that I'd stood up and left. I mean, to me, it's just indicative of the fact that you can get into really bad habits, spending time doing non-important stuff. Not absolutely no question that the meeting was necessary, Chris, not questioning the meeting, but to have 20 people sitting in that meeting for 5 hours was, for me, a sign of madness, really, from a management perspective.
You know what? It's really interesting. I often, at least 70% of the time I work with a new SME business, it's to reintroduce meetings because so many of the people go, we've had, from different industries. What's the point? I sit there for 3 hours and only talk for 2 minutes. And because the meeting structures aren't fit for purpose. It's not, break it into five different meetings and have five meetings of 15 minutes rather than everybody that. So I totally get it. And yeah, I must be, yeah, must be the
I sort of got used to it, but not really. I never really fit in. I
quite a
always
fast-paced guy, so I can imagine it would be pretty one of your hells, I would imagine.
it really was, and to be honest with you, I mean, amazingly, and I look back now, I mean, I'll always be grateful for the time that I spent in the NHS. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I just met some. I would be critical of the NHS generally for not being efficient enough and not getting a little bit stuck in the bureaucracy.
yes,
But actually, also, I've made some amazing lifelong friends,
brilliant.
and most of the people that you meet in the NHS are genuinely great people. So
Yes, yeah,
it's a real balance, actually, and it's really difficult to. I'm always somebody who's reluctant to criticise because I've worked
yeah,
in the NHS and I've seen some of the problems. I think there are things you could do that would help remove some of the layers of bureaucracy and help the great people in the NHS make their
yeah,
own choices. Um, it just seems quite. I never really understood. I still don't understand, coming from the background that I do, why people can't. I don't understand. We've got to manage risk, but if managing risk is in the end suffocating every other decision, that's worrying.
yeah,
It's one of the reasons I moved on, really, Chris, because I had a great time. I worked for two NHS trusts, one in Leeds, one in Bradford, and had a good time,
yeah,
uh, but felt that career-wise it wasn't really pushing on in the right direction for me, and I had no real interest in becoming a chief exec of an NHS organisation. I just didn't feel that I was a I ended up getting on something called this fast track chief exec scheme that the NHS does, and I ended up getting on that scheme, and they did, like, the profiling and all the testing, and
yeah,
at the end of that process, I met with the woman who was doing the feedback, and she was like, "I've no idea why you're working for the NHS." That was our opening gambit, Chris. I remember going home to Sarah, my wife, and saying, "Do you know what? She might have a point. I'm not sure I'm built for this over the long term." And then sometimes things happen with an element of luck and what have you. I ended up working for, which sounds really boring, but is one of my favourite jobs, working for one of the NHS's regional procurement bodies. So they have all these bodies all over the country, and they run at regional levels procurement for everything that you can think of that hospitals particularly need. And I joined it at what I'd say was a relatively low ebb. And I just really it unleashed the salesman in me, which I think had been hiding for some time, Chris. One of the things about doing broadcasting is you learn to be a salesman because when you're on air, that's what you got to do, right? You can't just sit there and be miserable, right? You've got to be high energy on the go. When you're in football commentary on your own for 90 minutes, Chris,
Absolutely.
you can't mumble along. You've got to, no matter what's happening in front of you, there's a game to sell. You want people to listen to your commentary.
Absolutely.
So I think I had a little bit of that. And I was suddenly out with some great people working in the team that I had, selling these products to other NHS organisations outside of the immediate geography while working with the NHS trusts within the Yorkshire and Humber region. And suddenly we started to expand, and I got a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? A buzz. I got a buzz from doing. It was frowned upon as well, Chris. That's the funny thing. There was all these sort of like non-compete arrangements, sort of shake of the hands. We won't take your NHS organisations if you don't take ours. And I perhaps didn't adhere to the rules there, Chris. So suddenly we'd taken a chunk from the east of England, and we started to pick them up in the south central, and we got some in the northwest, and I loved it. And by doing it, I think it raised my profile.
Yeah.
And I was approached by a headhunter for a very large NHS clinical waste business, so the predominant one in the UK. And they said, look, we're having a bit of a tough time, and we need someone to come in to give the sales team fresh energy and fresh edge. And to me, it was like, yeah, this is it. This is the opportunity. So I was probably, I'm going to age my 38, 39 at that point, and when that opportunity came along.
Right.
And that to me was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. It took a little bit of time to go from there to being a genuine entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I was full on sales then, and I just felt a natural rhythm and affinity with it. And
Yes.
and I was like, I was very lucky, I suppose, because you don't get it that often. One of the things about coming into an organization that's not doing very well is that you get the opportunity to go there and clear the decks and bring in your own people and build your own team in your own image. So we've just brought in this great group of people, super high energy, really understood the mission. My co-founder and partner in bidding limited is a guy called David Hazelwood. He came to me in that job, so he's been up with me for a long time, Chris, that's for sure. And he was able to transform the bidding side of the business for me, and just it got my rhythm, if you like. And so we had this amazing journey. We went from a business that was probably winning 30 to 40% of the work that it went for. In the year that I was sales director, we were up at about 90% of the work.
Wow. Wow.
So we really transformed the energy. The customers really loved it. I think they appreciated that we were trying to elevate and pressure the operations side, that we were trying to really deliver what we promised.
Yeah.
And then also we made a massive effort that when we were writing bids, that the bids were great. And one of the things I used to say to the team, and I'd still say it to David today, is, if imagine being the person marking your work, and you've got 5 or 6 or 7, 20, 30, 40,000 pieces of work that you've got to mark. Just let's make them interesting, right? Let's make at the end of it, let's make the marker go, wow, wow. The one I really, really remember is that one, because let me tell you, that's half the battle. That's half the battle. And then, of course, there's the presentation skills. And that's something which always surprises me that, I love presenting in those circumstances. I love sales presenting. I love going into a room, telling the story, exciting the group of people I'm with, and getting them in the right frame of mind, Chris. So this was all of that. I started as sales director, and it went really, really well. And then they said, we'd like to expand our services outside of just doing clinical waste. We sort of reached a critical mass. We had a few problems with the competitions authority while I was there, basically saying, you've got enough, you've got to stop it, you can't buy anybody else, you've just got to focus on the job in hand. And so I ended up building for them a patient transport business, and a business that was a really strong digital business that was focused into primary care. And that was a combination of organic sales, Chris, and my first real experience, which went at a rapid rate of knots, of mergers and acquisitions, which I have to tell you is the best sales job of all time, if I'm honest with you. So I love that. We did 20 acquisitions, I think, over a 4-year period, and it was just non-stop, Chris. And for me, absolutely fantastic. And we'd really expanded. The business was fantastic. So we went from, sort of zero turnover on the paper to about, I can't remember the end, 65, 70 million, something like that by the time the 4 years were up. And
Wonderful.
that was a combination of fantastic organic wins coupled with lots and lots of M&A work. So it was a really fantastic journey. Again, I don't want to take a lot of the credit for it. I was able to bring in great people, Chris, and when you've got a group of high energy, excited, motivated people, you can do
Brilliant.
all sorts that you couldn't otherwise do.
Absolutely.
So
Goodness.
that got me to that point, and then um, I think I got to the point where I felt like I'd come to the end of the road with the job, I think, to be honest. I was tired.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
traveling
Yeah.
a lot. We had operations across Europe. We had them in the US. Um, I had kids. I had little kids by then, Chris. So my kids, I've got to try and think, got to try and quickly age them. So they were probably 6 and 8 at that
Yeah.
point. And I just wasn't seeing them
Yeah.
at all, and I always wanted to be and pride myself on being a great dad. And I just felt that was slipping to compensate by being a
Yeah.
great business person. And at that particular point, my wife had started a business um, around supporting ambulance services. Now, I had a background then as well, and these things happen completely by happenstance. No plan, Chris. I'm not a man with a plan, never have been. Um, and I took the decision literally one morning. I went into the office and I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done with it. Now, I
Brilliant.
think often people just soldier on.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't really tell you what for why, because I'd never done it before. I literally packed my bag up. I got a box, filled it, went downstairs, got in my car, drove
Oh,
home. I actually went to see my mum and said, because I thought I better check with my mum just in case she thinks I've gone nuts. And then I went home and told Sarah that I was leaving. And that just opened up this huge opportunity. I'd just seen all of this stuff that we've been doing in the American business. I'd seen value, personal and business value. I'd seen how to do M&A work to add value to businesses. I'd built a handful of digital businesses and I could just see that was the future. And to be honest with you, running a patient transport business is really, really hard work with not so great returns in terms of
yes.
value of it. It's not something I'd strongly recommend unless you're very passionate about patient transport. So I'd really started to hone down on the digital side of
Right.
this stuff. And so Sarah's business was designing and building a digital marketplace for the NHS to procure ambulance services because there was
Okay.
a hole in the market for it. And
Yes.
so we didn't really have a conversation which she said, Brendan, do you want to come and join and sort of use all of your sales now to push the business forward? But she was kind enough eventually I think I just turned up in the office one day and then just started to keep turning up in the office. And then people would ring up inbounding us to ask us about it, and I'd just pick up the phone and start to do the calls and the sales and the meetings. And
Brilliant.
we landed a really big customer, an ambulance trust in the Northwest, who were fantastic for us and remain so even to this day. And I think it just was a natural thing that, we were a brilliant partnership. Sarah's a brilliant, brilliant product person, and I think I'm reasonably competent when it comes to sales. So together, we've made this really nice team, high
Yes.
energy.
Brilliant.
Uh, and so that got us 365 Response, which is our sort of our main core business.
Okay.
And that we sold. We sold that 3 years ago, this coming February, to a large American company called RL Datix. But in the meanwhile, I was also working with a number of other companies, Chris, as an investor and as a board member. And I've been lucky enough now to have 5 exits,
Brilliant.
which is great, and it gives you a lot of confidence and experience. We've done some with private equity. Mainly we've done it without.
Okay.
And I have mixed feelings about private equity. Some I think is absolutely fabulous, some not so much. So it's always a challenge in terms of investment. And sometimes with 365, we wanted to put our foot to the floor
Yes.
because we could see opportunity right at that moment. And if
Yeah.
you're not, it's not that we weren't creating good free cash, but just not enough free cash just to do all the things we wanted to do. We wanted to go and acquire a couple of businesses that were competitors. We wanted to invest a little bit more in the technology to go a bit faster than we were doing. And so sometimes you need a partner to help you do that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's my a very rapid run through my career, Chris.
Amazing. Amazing. So yeah, that's quite a varied as you say, very career all the way through. So you've done a number of build, yeah, extra number of businesses, and so Biddy Limited was sort of part of that process of you created that
Yeah, so
on that journey, basically.
So bidding limit is an interesting sort of journey for me and an unusual one because originally the business was started when I left the clinical waste business or the patient transport business and digital business as was then. It was with two of the guys that I worked with in that
Right.
organization that we set it up, but very much at a sort of a chairman level, very much at a distance. I was fully ingrained and focused on the 365 business
Yes.
and the other businesses that I was working with. So it was very much a hands-off relationship, and it went reasonably well all the way up to the beginning of COVID. And then once we hit COVID, the business just disappeared. And we'd actually exclusively focused on only doing health bid. So the original version of Bidding Limited was the business called Health Bid.
Right.
But what we found, obviously, as soon as we hit COVID, there weren't any health procurements taking
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Everything stopped. And that really was a difficult phase for us,
Yes.
both in terms of the leadership and both in terms of the individuals that were working for the business at that point. We'd been very steady, gentle growth over a number of years. I say good team, good culture, and then it just sort of blew apart. Relationships, it blew apart finances. So at the end of COVID and having sold 365, I decided that at that point there were financial issues in the business that I wanted. If I was going to do it,
Yeah.
which is me, I like to be all in, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I said to the two other main shareholders that effectively I'd buy out the majority share of the business. So I went from being a 40% shareholder up to, I think at that point to about 70. And since then now I've sort of crept up to about 85.
Right.
So I really, maybe that's a personality weakness, but I think at that point we felt that we could inject capital into the business, but we wanted equity protection to do that.
Well, I guess you said you're all in, and it's difficult
Yeah,
to be all in when
all
you're
in.
not owning all in. I mean,
Yeah, that's exactly right, Chris.
because they would that would naturally create conflict for you, wouldn't it? I really want to do this, but you're not letting me because I don't
And,
have that control.
yeah, and the other guys, being frank, hadn't had those exits. So
Yeah.
if we were able 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago this July, to acquire another consultancy bidding business up in Edinburgh, which we funded. Now that wouldn't have been possible under the old cap table because
Yeah.
either yeah, it would have been very much more difficult, I think, in terms of the equity share and the value that would have been put in. So, we did that piece of work to transform the business in the first case from being purely a health-based consultancy to an all-market consultancy
Yeah.
and to build out a bit more depth and breadth in the business so that one of the scars I got from COVID was that if you're too niche and that niche comes under unique and distinct pressure, Chris, then you've got to do something about it. So that was
100%.
that was the thinking behind that, and that in turn has led us to the bit where we started off when I started to talk about the digital transformation now that's been
Yes.
undertaken within the business. So,
That's
it's a bit the bidding limit is a little bit of a jigsaw that we're trying to pull together into a easily recognizable single entity as we
yeah.
move forward, which is good. It's the journey I envisaged. But one thing I've learned over time, Chris, it never quite goes exactly as you want to. It never happens as quickly as you'd like,
No.
and always, things that you have to deal with that you'd either wish not to deal with,
Yeah.
or are just, awkward. Like, I think, we briefly said at the beginning of the call before we started that the current economy isn't enormously helping us right now. Did I did I plan for that, Chris? Not really. You can't always plan for everything. It's a question of being agile when you get there.
Absolutely, and I think COVID taught us that specifically, didn't it? I think that of all the things that people didn't envisage was a global pandemic that we shut everything down for that period of time. It's just like in any length of strategic planning, you could have weeks of that. I don't think that would have been in the top 10 things people were worried about. So no, totally get that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So this is a very simplistic question to get at. But what would you say are your biggest learnings about growing businesses, Brendan. And you've covered so many different things. But if you had to pick three, let's say, what would be the things that you'd tips you pass on?
I think I just said I mentioned about being agile and being able to pivot.
Yes.
Often when I'm doing some coaching work or I'm doing some non-exec type work with people, that is really hard. That idea that you may come into a business with one set of thoughts about what the business will look like,
Yeah.
but then you've tested it with the market, and ultimately the market has pushed back and said, "No, I don't really think that's going to work."
Yeah.
You've got to be able to pivot, and I think that's really, really tough, particularly for SMEs. I think I've sadly seen SMEs fail where I think that they weren't that far away from success,
Yeah.
but their willingness to pivot a little bit, move a little bit to meet the customer hasn't been there because they've been very, very committed to a singular, this is the idea, this will work. And often, I think businesses that tend to be consistently successful are listening, growing, and changing. Right? And that's difficult. It's difficult. One of the things that I think is always hard as an entrepreneur is talking to your teams and saying that thing that we used to do actually we don't think customers love that as much as they used to, and we can see that reflected in price. We can see that reflected in a drop off of activity. When we were in 365, we started out as a consultancy and digital business but ended up as a total digital business because we found that the consultancy work eventually just became really hard to come by, and we were competing against KPMG, Deloitte, and all
Yeah.
these people. And we thought, why are we spending all of our time trying to chase that work when we've got this brilliant business that customers are coming back to us for time and time again? So I think pivoting is really, really important. And I'm sure everyone says on here, but you just got to be ready for the hard days as well as the good days.
Yeah. Resilience comes up a lot. Just that.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
I think people naturally think it's going to be easy, and perhaps it's because I do an annual lecture at the business school in Manchester. So I get a group of, relatively young people. And I like to say to them very clearly, not everyone in this room is going to become Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Actually, for me, success in being an entrepreneur is being, firstly, can you build a sustainable long-term business? If you can, for me, that's success, right? That is not easy. It's
Yeah.
not a given. Lots and lots and lots of people never get to 100,000 turnover, never mind a million turnover or 2 million turnover. So
Yeah.
it's that resilience to keep going, and that resilience when you have difficult periods. And I don't know any entrepreneur or indeed any business that hasn't had
Yeah.
difficult periods. I'm not sure those businesses exist, Chris. So you've got to be prepared to work long hours. You've got to be prepared sometimes to roll your sleeves up and do stuff that you thought you'd left behind 10 years ago. You've got to be prepared to talk to that difficult customer that is giving you and your team a really hard time. And sometimes you've got to let customers go that are sucking up the energy out of your business. And these things are all really, really hard things to do
Yeah.
and not things you necessarily think about at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. So for me, I don't know, it's not everything, but if you don't have resilience, don't start a business because you're going to need it.
Yes, I remember our CEO, our ex-CEO. He said to me many years ago. He said, Chris, the job of a business owner is to solve problems. So if you don't like problems, sort of get out of Dodge. It's like he said they come together. But the thing I've come to believe, Brendan, is that growth by its nature causes problems. So actually, if we don't have problems, we're probably not growing fast enough. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I totally friction is something that is unavoidable.
Friction is
You know,
energy, which is great.
yeah, it is. And when one of the greatest challenges in my career is being when I've had accelerated growth. So lots and lots and lots and
Yeah.
lots of things are happening concurrently, and you've got to deal with lots and lots and lots of things. You've got your staff are stressed because there's more work coming in than they can possibly manage with. Actually, you can't recruit quickly enough to backfill, and you've got customers coming to you every day saying you said you'd do this, but you haven't quite got there yet. And so, one of the great stresses that when I was running the patient transport business was we just grew too quickly. We had a really great plan, a really good team. We did it once and people liked it. And then they came back and back and back and back and back. And me being me, And I'm sure there'll be members of that team would say, I wish Brendan had slowed down a little bit. And maybe with retrospect, that's absolutely right. We got a rhythm, and it was brilliant, and I enjoyed that moment. But it did lead us into an environment where there was a lot of stress, there were a lot of things breaking, a lot of things that we assumed were wrong. That's another thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of things you assume are not the reality of you have to be ready.
Sorry, Brendan. I've lost you for a little bit there, so please forgive me. It was my end. It's
You're all right. Yeah, you
um,
went. Either I'd bored you to tears, Chris, or I'd just lost you because we had a breakdown in communications.
it's always that funny look on your face. It's like you get caught in some strange thing. So that's why I just try to have a neutral smile. Yeah, no, sorry. So yeah, no, you were bang on talking about that point of just keeping it, yeah, just keeping going and accepting, and I think as you said, accepting that things aren't ever going to be as you plan.
They're not. And again, in every business I've been in, whether it's been as a chairman or as a non-exec director, or whether it's chief exec, or whether it's an investor, or even and as founder, every single one of those businesses has gone off on a tangent or a path that I couldn't have predicted at the beginning of the journey.
Yeah,
We may have broadly been in the space we thought we were going to be, but not absolutely. And that comes back to my first point. I just think you have to be flexible enough of mind to accept that
yeah,
one of the things about working in the public sector, I think, is it's pretty linear. You know,
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
you've got a really clear picture about that direction of travel. I think running an SME isn't like that, and actually running bigger private businesses doesn't tend to be like that. Or you get more structure, so it does get a little bit closer to that, I think, in bigger businesses.
I would suggest I'd be interested to get your opinion. If it wasn't that unpredictable, then it wouldn't attract people like you and I.
No, I think that's absolutely. I was having that very same thought as you're saying it, Chris. I think part of the reason I sort of know when I'm building a business that there's going to come a moment when it's big enough that I don't want to be responsible for it anymore.
Ye- Yes, we.
So, so there's a learning point for me about, and I do quite a lot of work with entrepreneurs thinking about exit.
Right.
And for me, one of my key learnings is don't be there too long. It's really hard when you get there too long. Understand your limitations. There are things that I do not enjoy and don't want to replicate from previous jobs, and much of that's about scale. So my job in Bidding Limited, in my mind, is to scale it to, maybe the sort of 6, 8 million turnover point, and then exit stage left. Because once it's got to that point, you're going to start getting into a bit more of a corporate infrastructure.
Yes.
There are things in there that will slow me down and annoy me in equal measure, Chris, that I don't want to get involved with. And it's okay to say that, I think.
Absolutely. The thing we've seen time and time again is the behavioural profile of entrepreneurial people that start businesses and get them to a point isn't the same behaviour as the people that successfully grow them steadily over time. And I use the word steadily deliberately. It's like that the energy to get to there is incredible. It doesn't necessarily need that energy to then once it's launched to keep it going. I guess it is in the analogy would be the rocket leaving the Earth's
Yes,
atmosphere.
I think it comes to a point where you know yourself the bits of the process that you enjoy. Could I carry the business to the next stage with investors, with a board? Of course I could. I've done it before. It wouldn't be an issue. Do I want to do that? Because I understand the changing. At the moment, I own my own time. So I decide, if I want to go away like I did last year to New Zealand for 4 weeks, because I've never
Brilliant,
been to New Zealand, I'm
brilliant.
not I'm not asking permission, Chris, of anybody for that.
No, no,
Get a bit bigger, you get to a point where you've got an investor board, you've got you've got a chairman that you've got to spend time with. and you've got to manage all of those relationships consistently while continuing to grow the business.
Yeah.
It's another tier of, I'm going to find a polite way, but bothersomeness that I'm not sure at my age, Chris, and with my experience, I necessarily want to do. I mean, I might do it for a short period of time, a sprint as part of building out the business to the next phase, but beyond that, I don't want it. I wouldn't. No one could ask me to work full time in a full time
No.
traditional job anymore. It'd just be nuts.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's accepting that there's that stage when we have to pass we want to pass the baton. It's like
Yes.
it no longer is fun. We do a lot. We do a lot of work with. It is that succession to a CEO, right? As a choice between you exit via sale or put a full CEO board in place and let them run it for a long term. And the only trouble the only reason I was smiling is the only trouble that I've had is then stopping, and I mean this in a positive, stopping the entrepreneur that said I'm absolutely knackered, starting the next business straight away.
Oh, well, this is my problem. I came out of the sale of 365 and thought I'll have 12, a good 12 months off, and then I'll think about what comes next. Within 12 months, Chris, we've invested in this business, we've done an acquisition. I've joined the board of a charity. We've continued to work with a couple of other businesses that we've invested in. It's like, hang on, that's not quite what I imagined on the day that I sold the business, but that energy doesn't. It has to go somewhere.
It's in your nature, isn't it?
It's in my nature, and I love doing it, right? There's a
Yeah,
huge mountain of joy associated. Some days I come off the phone and think, oh, what am I doing this for? But most of the time,
yeah,
I like the world of possibilities that opens up to you as an entrepreneur
yeah,
that doesn't open up to you in other circumstances. And so I can, I like, not only do I like to do it myself, and I like to be with other people
yeah.
who either want a little bit of help on that journey or in that journey and just want someone to chat to about it, because it's great, but it is stressful. It's not without its challenges. But my wife, I think, would probably say, "Do this one, and then that's it." Then, and I say now, not lying to you, Chris, that probably will be the case. But who knows? Really, who knows? Because if in 3 years' time, Bidding Limited has got to where we hope we get to, and we're in that scaling phase, um, you know, the other thing I'm always honest about. If we get to the point where we've got really good year-on-year growth, fantastic economic metrics within the business, and someone knocks on the door and says to me, "We're interested in acquiring your business," at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to take that call.
Absolutely.
And I know for some people, business is about this really long, long curve of time where it's their business, it's their baby. For me, it's huge energy while I'm doing it. Really, I really like the businesses I do. Obviously, else I wouldn't do
Yeah.
them. But ultimately, it's about growing and then bequeathing it onto somebody else, and making a capital return on that.
Yeah, it's knowing when, isn't it? I think
Yes, it's not a science that, by the way, either, is it? It's
no,
it's an instinct thing, I think. And I do find people, all entrepreneurs that I meet, will always overestimate how fast and how quick and how easy it is going to be to grow,
yeah,
and that sometimes has a really negative impact on their exit decision making. There's a number. I always say, look at the things that are around you, the environment. Some of those will be economic factors, where are interest rates, how easy is cash, what are your competitors being sold for?
yeah,
Because you want to try, and the ultimate is to try and find that perfect moment where
yeah,
there's competition there's a scarcity of your type of business.
100%.
Money is cheap. Primarily, you want people coming in from the US who are prepared to overpay because the pound is weak, and
Yeah,
you've got all those things coming together, so you
yes,
can get a maximum output for your exit. And it's a really difficult thing to do, but you do see people go to the other side, and then it becomes quite difficult, because
yeah,
the classic fail I see, Chris, is that often companies feel like they have to be so predominantly in charge of the market they're in to attract a buyer. And I always say, and having bought lots and lots of things, don't do that. You need to give the buyer upside. So when the day comes, we sell this business, which hopefully that day will come eventually. I want to say to the buyer, we've done we've done 15% of this market, and there is another 85% for you to go at.
Absolutely.
And that is your upside, right? We've done all the hard work to get you to base camp. We're going to let you get on with doing the rest of it.
Absolutely.
But often I meet entrepreneurs who've done it, and they think, I've got to show that I've got all the market. And you're like, well, no, because then you're actually, your valuation's just dropping.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It might be a lovely business, might have massively attractive margins and free cash flow, but actually you're just deterring a buyer because there's
Absolutely.
nowhere for them to go.
And and markets don't like large players, monopolies, etc. Therefore, the more we've got, the less actually we're likely to grow, and people get that, don't they? With the other thing I found we do a lot of work on, which is interesting, but you talk about the potential growth and exit is to plan the other side. Because I think what we find a lot of entrepreneurial people, that the goal is the sale without planning the other side, and then you get close to it, and it for very driven people, the idea of what it feels like doing nothing because there's no plan is, and I've seen sabotage. I mean, I've literally seen sales sabotage very significantly by the owners because they didn't know what they were going to do next, if that
Mm.
makes sense. They had no plan, and that because active people are going to want to do something, so having something to do is going to be key.
Yeah, I think there are two things, two lessons I think I'd say to people who are selling. One is remember that when you've sold, you've sold. And so if you're asked by the acquirer to stay with the business for a period of time, just be really honest about what that period of time is likely to look at. Not always, but likely that you are not going to be the person making decisions.
Yep.
Decisions are going to be made that you definitely do not agree with. And ultimately, there will be an end date as they look to put somebody else in to run that business within the confines of a bigger business, more likely than not. So prepare yourself for that because I think often, and you'll know this, and this is a sales tactic, you'll get a lot of love and affection in the sales process from the
Yeah.
buyer. They'll make you feel like $1 million. I'd do that. That's my job. I would absolutely do that. And if I felt it was going to help me buy the business, I would
Of course. Yeah.
weave to you a story that make you feel like you'd be really important in the post-sale environment. My experience is that's less happens less frequently than you would think, and most entrepreneurs are still entrepreneurs at heart and don't want to work within the confines of another business and working to somebody else as your line manager with
Yeah.
annual leave and all that goes with it. So I think there's that bit, and I agree about don't leave yourself with a hard drop because that I can absolutely envisage and imagine people getting to the end of a deal and thinking to themselves, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? What
Yeah.
comes
Uh,
next? I'm out the door, and I've done deals. We sold a company. I was an investor in and worked in a company called Rotomaster we sold it to a company that was part of Sony, and they just didn't want the management team. So
yeah.
myself and the guy who had originally created Dr. Chris Jones both left on the first day, and that's quite tough
Yeah.
because you're gone. You're sitting in the solicitor's office, you sign the
Yeah. You're
docs,
not good. Yeah.
you're not going back in the office, you're not going back to see the team. That's moved now, and you have to prepare yourself for that. I mean, I think there's the thing obviously that dictates how that feels to you a little bit is the size of the exit as well, of course, Chris.
Yeah.
So, the bigger the exit, I guess in reality, the less painful that is. But there's still this thing about what am I going to do next? And I think for most entrepreneurs,
Yes.
there needs to be some form of first acknowledgement. It's going to feel a little bit like, I suspect, a bit of a bereavement, if you like, because you've lost something that you've invested
Absolutely.
so much time in, and you've had so much control in terms of what it is, how it looks, how it's run. It's sort of your image, and then that's taken away from you. So I think yeah, there is absolutely a need for that preparation and
Yeah.
thought about. I am a living embodiment of somebody who didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what was coming next, but just got on with the next thing
Yes.
because it felt like a natural thing to do because I didn't want in the end, the reality was, Chris, that I didn't want 12 months off. What am I going to do with myself for 12 months? I wanted to
Yes.
I actually wanted to get on with new stuff and get excited again about new stuff and different stuff. So, I was probably lucky to have another business that was percolating quietly
Yep.
while I had the one that was mainly focused on. So, yeah, it is a challenge for any entrepreneur, I think, as you come to the end of that journey.
But yeah, absolutely. It's something we urge people to think about. What is the other side? Just to make sure that you actively want to go to it. You don't feel it. Unfortunately, because there is I think it's a global stat, of 90, I think literally 91% of business owners do regret the sale within a year of selling. And that's such a shame, given for many people it's their life, it is their life's work, as you say, they've had it
Yes.
for many years.
I guess for lots of people, there isn't a second run round or the third run round or the fourth run round. And if you're doing it just the once, I have huge sympathy about the challenge. And I think often the pain of moving your business on, no matter what the exit value is, tends to be the fact that you've lost that control, and you can
Yeah.
look from the outside in, and you say, why have they done that, and why are they doing this, and they're breaking something that didn't need to be broken, and I think that's a natural, normal reaction. Me and Sarah took a very conscious decision once we'd left the business completely that we wouldn't really get involved in any discussions about it whatsoever, because there's nothing we
Yeah.
could add or do at this point that would make any difference. The new owners do whatever they feel like with that business, whether it be good or bad. That is absolutely their responsibility. They bought it; it's their business. It's got
Yeah.
nothing to do with us. And so, rather than get cross or miffed that they've done something that we may not have done, we just stop talking about it. To be frank,
It's interesting, actually. Now we're talking about it, Brendan. It is that we do find many business owners are in effect defined by their business, and it is that one, and most of them are doing the sort of the ones. It's the one thing, and then and that so it has to be. I have to get it to here to do the next thing or to retire, whatever the right words are. It feels to me that you've got a different attitude to a lot of people I meet, where it is looking at business, in a very positive way, or almost business as a commodity. I'm going to build it, grow, find the best point for sale, or be open to that, and then move on. And
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I think that probably reduces that likelihood. The sale of the business is going to be as personally what's the right word, unpleasant.
yes, yeah,
But
yeah. I think one of the things, because I had that period of time working with. Oh, I've lost you there. Sorry, just a second.
that's okay.
I had a period of time where working with that, I learned a lot. Sorry, somebody just called me there, and I thought I turned every single item off on my
It's
computer, and then somebody
it's all
somebody
good.
called me and shocked me. You just disappeared. Sorry
It
about that.
happens. It's all
It happens. It
yeah.
happens. The best laid plans. I thought I'd literally gone round my office and turned everything off, but there you go. I found something I didn't turn off. Um, so yeah, what I was going to say was that I think the reason that my mindset is framed that way is because of the experience I had with the American business. So
Yes.
there was an element of dispassion about the business building in a way that was different, I guess, to being something you started without that experience and knowledge. So that makes it sound, it makes potentially makes me sound quite hard-faced about it, but it's not like that.
I,
But it
no,
taught me, it taught me some useful business skills that I think perhaps people don't naturally pick up. So when you're buying and selling businesses, it becomes it absolutely has to be fundamentally about economics, right?
yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. And
Yes.
so when you start to really think about the economics and the buying and the selling, it's sort of the prism under which you start to look at everything that
Yeah.
you do.
Great.
So I think that's the difference really here. That I haven't, and I don't think I'll be breaking any secrets here. I absolutely get it when an entrepreneur has something that they've built from the ground that they are is their life work. It's a passion.
Yeah.
But I'm not an inventor. I'm not an inventor. I don't
Yes.
invent things. I sort of find solutions for business to help them do their business better, and I see an economic value in that. And I work with all of the organizations I've ever worked with have all been very similar in their outlook, in the sense that they are doing that thing. They're creating a solution to a problem. And ultimately, every entrepreneur in that group has asked me to help them think about firstly, the fundamental economics, that what economics makes sense for me to get that exit. And
Yeah.
then the second bit is about learning to be is getting a little bit of detachment to allow yourself to do that process of sale.
Yeah.
So often I'm coming in. with businesses that are a little bit more mature. They're probably closer to the end than they are to the beginning.
Yeah.
They need some help to move from the person that was at the beginning of the journey, who was very much focused on the love of the product and the love of the customer. They've gone through that phase. They're now in a part where they've elevated themselves up. So they're not doing all the day-to-day stuff. They're not doing all the sales anymore, Chris. They're not doing all the operational touch points. They're running a business. And that's, I suppose, where my background comes in. Having done so many, both sides, both buying and selling, that you become more associated in your mind with that metric. So, I
Yes.
know, I know, Chris, I know where this business needs to get to. I know what the velocity of sales needs to look like. I know where the margin needs to be. In part, my vision for all of my businesses, and Sarah was very different to me in that sense. She'd sort of say to me, "Well, when do we sell, Brendan?" And I said, "Well, there'll be a moment when the velocity is at its highest.
Yeah.
I've built up a bank of potential suitors for the business, and we think that there's something further up here that we'd rather not get involved with. So
Yeah.
maybe something changing in the economy, and we want to get that perfect junction. And that's so that is that dispassionate about the business and the people. It absolutely isn't. You can't own and run a business and not have a passion for it and a care for the people that work for you. But
Yes.
I guess it's helpful if you're able to also be able to look at the things ahead of you and plan for those things ahead of you.
I think it's very helpful. I think, a lot of the people we work with get very, very emotional about their businesses to a point where that becomes unhelpful. So
Yes, I think that's very likely. And I've seen that on a number of occasions, Chris, where it's
yeah,
really hard to say to somebody, probably the best thing you can do at this point is to get out of the way,
yeah,
right? And actually, let's get somebody else in to run the business, because actually, I think the hardest thing when you're scaling a business, the hardest thing that you have to do is when the first generation of staff have probably done the journey,
yes,
and you have to start thinking about bringing new people in because you need more and different experiences to
yeah,
grow the business. That is horrible, right? And it's the bit that people, I'm sure, and I think again I've read statistics on this as well. It is one of the primary blockers for businesses scaling,
yes.
is that people don't like and don't want to do that challenge.
No, I agree.
But I'm sure if you went and picked any scaled business, the team, and you see it all the time. You just have to look at founder story, the big founder stories, the
Absolutely.
Facebook founder story. I think there was three or four of them, and now there's one of them.
Yeah,
And that is indicative of what happens even with smaller SMEs as they
yeah,
go. I always look at the key milestones, but because I'm a digital man, so the milestones will be different if you're doing big capital things. But your first million SaaS, probably 2 million SaaS, then 5 million SaaS, and then 10 million SaaS.
yeah,
You can make do amend at 1 million SaaS. People can do lots and lots of things, and that you can have a number of people doing effectively a number of jobs.
yeah.
Once you get to 2 million, you need to start to put people into specialist spaces because it
Yes,
doesn't work otherwise. At 5 million, you've got finance teams, you've got HR, you've got all your development teams are designed to do specific things. Likewise with your sales. So suddenly those people that were at 1 million that were brilliant for you as sort of jack of all trades, masters of none, which sounds rude, but I don't mean it to. I think those people are brilliant.
yep,
Not work. They don't know where they are in the business once it's scaled like that. So they
yes.
get lost. They don't. That person who you lent on to do everything, you've now got five other people that you can lean on to do specialist things. So
Yes.
that's a real challenge, I think, for anybody's journey is and that thing about being too close to the business is often it isn't really being too close to the business. It's a problem with working through your people to get the right people at the right
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm pretty sure that that's true universally, pretty much. That if you were to pick any business that scaled and asked the owner what changed in the business, I should think most of them will say it was people.
I
We have
would think.
to be
I would
different.
think so. Absolutely. It things need to change. There's a great book by Marshall Goldsmith. What got us here won't get us there, and
Yes.
that's very true. The people and the systems and it's like we have to reinvent ourselves on a regular basis to get to that next level. because we'll only perform to the level of the team that we have. So unless we're looking, I mean, there'll be the odd business that picked exactly the right team right at the start that went from zero to a trillion. I'm sure there is somewhere, but there won't be many of them.
I don't know them, Chris. I
Yeah.
don't know them, and I think that that the reality is, and sometimes it happens. Like when I'm talking about where I feel my exit moment tends to come in a business, and we talked earlier on about the things that would make that the case. It may be that I'm just kidding myself, that really I'm not fit for the rest of the journey, and actually I need to get out of the way. And that's also a challenge for owners as well. When you do the sort of beauty parade with private equity, one of the things that anybody needs is a real backbone to be able to take the fact that you can walk into, everyone watches Dragon's Den, and trying to get money out of private equity is a little bit like doing Dragon's Den to a degree, except at a much deeper degree. And it's quite hard when people tell you that your human capital, to use a horrible phrase, isn't good enough for them to invest in, and that you would need
Yeah.
to do X, Y, and Z to get to the next step.
Yeah.
That's hard, especially if the human capital in question is yourself. And they're saying, really, we need another chief exec, not yourself. So, I think I think that is what I think in the US, there's a lot more openness and awareness of those steps in the journey. I
Yes.
don't know that in the UK we're very good at doing those conversations and thinking about how we do those steps as we move through the process. I don't know what that. I don't know that's because we're naturally very polite and lovely as people. I like to think that we are, whereas I think Americans can be a bit more brash and forward. Every American business I've either worked with or been involved with, it's not. There's no passion play here. This is about
Yeah.
an absolute belief in growth over all things.
Yeah.
And I don't always agree with it. In fact, I find some of it quite uncomfortable and
Yes.
distasteful, but actually it does make a difference. And that's where you're probably seeing where you see far more businesses scale in the US than you do here in the UK. It's a difficult one, Chris, because I don't want to. I would never pass judgment on someone on this. I actually think being a nice person is is
I,
a value in itself. But I think in business sometimes that isn't always the option available to you if you want to keep growing.
I, 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 no, I would agree. I think one of the things that's most important, I believe, is to be really clear on your purpose and your culture. If
Yes.
if your purpose is to grow as quickly, as fast, and the most profitably as you can, then that's the driver. Therefore, everything else comes second to it. If it's to create a business that is designed to keep everyone happy within it, that's a different purpose. Therefore,
To
profit comes
me,
second.
it just those two things are a spectrum, but
Yes.
you describe it. This is a lifestyle business, and this is a business that's designed to build and sell.
And it is a spectrum because a lot of people will be somewhere in the middle.
Yes, I mean, absolutely, it's not binary, but it's you get my point. I think that,
100%. No, I
that
really do. And it,
and I think it's yeah, it's the thing that you have to sort of unpick as an entrepreneur about where you sit on that spectrum. I think for some people, they've got great. I've tried to invest in businesses that have been, in my mind, absolutely fabulous. But actually, once you got into it, you could see that there wasn't really any enthusiasm or willingness to change much of what they were doing.
yeah,
They were happy, very set, beautiful culture, beautiful business. Everybody was getting a reward,
yeah,
and that's great. And that works for lots and lots of people. It's not
yeah,
my style, but it's there. And coming back to a point I made earlier, big tick in the box for me. Anyone who can build any sort of business that's sustainable over a multi-year period of time, you're a success, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You are an absolute success.
100%. I mean, we talk a lot. The stats are horrific on business failures, which means
Yeah,
business longevity, success, and it's at a general level, it's 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years of operation, and of,
yeah,
of the 20% that survive, 80% of those fail in the following 5 years.
yes.
So, getting past 10 years is 5 years is good enough, but 10 years is incredible. But yeah, and it's about being able to reinvent yourself. And I think being a bit more dispassionate about what does need to change, including ourselves. And sometimes getting out of our own way and getting out of our business's way is the most important part of that. I, I could talk all day, Brendan, but I'm just thinking about the time we've got. I am going to ask you one last question, especially you're probably aware we're a business coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general. Who's had the biggest impact on you?
I'm going to give two shout outs for this, I think, Chris. So,
Brilliant.
um, in a business, when I was working in the American business, there was a guy called John Cleason who probably won't see this podcast, so he won't see the compliment that's coming. But
That's a shame.
he just taught me some fantastic. He taught me some fantastic lessons about business. He was as impressive a leader as I've met, and he was everything that you don't. He was quiet, he was circumspect, but he was just really good with people, and he could interact with anybody. But he made the effort, right? He made the effort, and he was really really impressive. And then he also taught me some basic skills about sales as well that I didn't necessarily have, and things about not don't negotiate with yourself. I think was one of the things he used to say. You know, you can let the other side negotiate with you effectively, and it's a good skill to learn. You know, we all have been in that situation where there's a bit of silence, and then you would basically negotiate against yourself. Um, and he was just great, and I'll always feel enormously. I probably never told him actually, but I always feel enormously grateful for the input that he had in my career. And without him, I don't think I'd have achieved the things that I've achieved.
Brilliant.
And the other shout out would be a guy you may or may not know in the Leeds community called Kenton Robbins. And Kenton was somebody who, I mean, he's gone on to do lots of good things in business. He was in the IOD and so on and so forth. But when I first met with him, he was a coach, and I was very, very, very much younger, Chris. And those coaching sessions I had with him when I was in the NHS, I think gave me the confidence to break away from what was a very stable, very organized, very easy to see career that would have been probably quite successful, but
Yeah.
probably deeply unfulfilling for me. And so Kenton's intervention there, and I guess like all great coaches, he didn't. I don't know that he did a great deal. Sorry, Kenton. But what he did do was just lay the foundations for me to think differently about my entire approach towards work. Probably gave me a push of confidence that I didn't necessarily have to think that I could operate entirely independently in the private sector. You sort of once you've been in the public sector for a little bit of a time, you think to yourself, that's a different world. It's a completely different world. There's no way I could move myself to there. But he definitely helped me with those. So I think those are the two people that I look back with enormous fondness, Chris, and would, if they were in a room. Well, I actually saw Kenton for the first time in quite a few years, about just before Christmas, and I've seen him since. I didn't tell him that because I'm trying to sell him something, so I don't want to give him the upper hand on that.
That's fair enough. No, I mean, I would suggest an interesting point is for me, coaching is about helping people find their way forward, not telling them what to do.
Yeah.
That makes
Oh, the
and,
100% thing I would tell you here is neither of those people ever said to me, Brendan, do this
no,
or Brendan, do that. They basically said to me, and this is the thing that's hard. The hard message I think from coaching is the only person that can instigate that change and make you a different person from the one you are today is you.
yeah,
However, here's some things I can see in you that might help you do that. I
yeah,
can't do it for you. So when sometimes I get phone calls from people, or more often nowadays, it shows my age, their phone calls, LinkedIn messages more often than not saying, can you help me find a non-exec director job? And my answer always is, I can't. I can't find you a non-executive director job, but I can tell you how you go and find them,
yeah.
but I can't go and get one for you. And I think that's coaching in a nutshell. It's learning that it all still comes from you, and it has to be your energy and your work that gets you to where you get to. Don't blame anybody else.
No,
But coaches can be fantastic in giving you a little bit of clarity as to which is the good direction to travel in, of which both those individuals I mentioned definitely did that for me.
yeah. I think the two key there's more than two, but two key parts are helping you find your way, and then having agreed what you're going to do, holding you accountable to do the things that you said you're going to do. That often are
Oh
the hard.
yes, yes, that's people find that quite uncomfortable though, don't they?
Absolutely, but that's often really, I often say when I start an engagement with a client, I said, I bet you there's at least five things you should be doing right now and you're not doing. So
Yeah.
write it down and we'll start there because that's probably going to give you the best momentum boost that we've had rather than me trying to find something with you.
Undoubtedly, Chris, the transformation, those two were pivotal transformation points in my
Brilliant.
professional career. On both occasions, it was because they did what you just described. And maybe it's just me, but I just got up and thought, leaving the room with Kenton feeling energized, thinking, I don't want to do the same thing that I did last year. Next year, I need to go and do something and do things that make you feel uncomfortable as well. Go and see people you don't know, go and talk to people and muscle your way into things that you shouldn't
Yep.
be. I mean, I don't do that as much nowadays because I don't need to do it as much. But, in that period, 35 to 45, I've been muscling to all kinds of stuff that I probably shouldn't have gone to or shouldn't have been invited to, or, because it just felt like maybe something happens here that wouldn't otherwise happen.
That, yeah, and that's entrepreneurship, isn't it? I mean, that really is. Just a last thought. The last thought is our founder Brad Chiggers is a serial entrepreneur, Australian living in America. He wrote one of his first books. He wrote was he called it Billionaire in Training. He actually, when he started it, he was a millionaire in training, but he thought, well, that's thinking too small, so billionaire. But he has this. He created this entrepreneurial ladder, which basically says we change identity as we grow, and it start and there's no need to get to the top, but it's just so we most of us start students, then most of us become employees, not everybody, but before we become then a bit if we that's right, if we then end up recruiting people, we become self-employed, then we have to manage them, so we're going to manage a bit business owner. And the only reason I'm talking about this, we get to business owner, then he describes the two levels above are investor, which is where we are making money with our own money. And then true entrepreneur from him, his definition would be when we're making money using other people's money.
Yeah,
Now,
interesting.
talking to you, it feels like you're at the level of this is I'm making money through, my gut. You're in. I feel you're in the business of growing businesses, whereas
Yes,
many business owners are in the businesses of plumbing or business
yes.
coaching or
No,
accounting.
absolutely. And I would, interesting set of ladders here that I'm not at this stage investing other people's money. I'm investing my own and continue to do so. And I love building businesses. That's my
And I was thinking that, but actually, you've got that money from other people by selling the previous one.
Well, that's true too. That is
Yeah,
true. That is very true.
it was just that differentiation because it's a really interesting one. Is that as we said, many people it is their life's work. They are that is their business, and that's. But clearly, you have developed that idea of looking at it differently, which is wonderful. Brendan, as I said, I could talk all day, and I'm sorry we've taken longer than we'd planned, but thank you so much for your time. It'd be great to swing back in another 6, 12 months, to see what's happening now, and also probably finish the conversation if that would be okay with you.
Really enjoyed it, Chris. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a fascinating conversation. I don't get the opportunity to talk about myself that often, so
Well, you must come and speak at an event or something.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, absolutely love to do that, Chris.
That would be really good. Well, for now, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Cheers, then.